Hello and welcome to the PowerSwitch, gaming's call-in talk radio show. My name is Peter Spezia, and today is June 25th, 2017. This is the 30th episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We use Discord as a means to add and drop callers to talk about video games, and switch the power that is found in a typical gaming podcast. You can join our server to participate during recordings at rhymeswithasia.com/call. It is the post-E3 lull. It has begun. Most game companies got their news out of the way at E3 2017 for this year, and so we're in kind of a period where not much news has happened. Thus, we still persevere. We continue on recording an episode. You may be interested to know why I'm speaking in a lower cadence and a bit slower. I guess it was interesting to get the feedback during our E3 episodes, and we had a couple shows where it was very late at night, and we were recording in our house, but people were still sleeping. There were very late episodes during those E3 times, and we had to kind of keep it a little chilled, a little mellow, and some people found it enjoyable to listen to. And I've been doing some reading on topics like this, so we're going to try for this one, see how it is going forward. It's certainly easier on the voice, that's for sure, when we speaking for longer periods of time, but also I think it's a little different. I think when I've heard feedback regarding the show, people generally called it chilled out to begin with, and it's the vibe when you get people calling in just to chat about video games and really hearing from the people calling in really about their perspectives. But to add this element to the show, I think it adds a little more uniqueness to what we present, because a lot of people, particularly on YouTube and other podcasts, like to be bam in your face and all about that. And I've done that for a time. We're coming up on 10 years of podcasting here for me, and that's crazy to think about, but that'll be for another weekend to think about that. But to kind of address you all like this, I think it's something I'd like to try going forward and see how it works. Leave feedback if you like this, and maybe you prefer the old style that you've been hearing for years. But just kind of wanted to throw that out there, I suppose. And that way, if I'm sick or for whatever reason, it's easier to speak in this cadence, in this sort of register. But let's talk about the main topic on the show today. And on a slow news week, it's got me thinking, like, what can I talk about? What can I bring to the show? And we'll talk about a particular sort of news story that can be expanded upon at the end of the show. But I want to first talk about what I've been playing in particular recently. And, on our last episode, we had DQP on the show, and DQP won our E3 2017 Yes or No contest. And we spent quite a while talking about the games that we were playing throughout, before, during, and a little bit after that E3 week. And it was quite a long segment, but brought up a lot of good games. And so one of those games that he mentioned was something that I wanted to play for a long time, and a particular variety of that game. And I decided, with the Steam sale going on and starting this week and continuing through July 5th, I'm like, you know what? There may be no better time than to jump on this particular game. And so that game is Superhot. Now, Superhot, in particular, its VR version, if you listen to that last episode, was what I was most excited to play. And, it has a discount of, 20% off, which, it doesn't really get discounted all that often. So to bring that to $20, like, that was something that I wanted to jump on in particular. But after playing it, and I haven't beaten it yet, it is a very trial and error heavy game, at least the VR version in particular. I haven't beaten it yet, but the time I spent with it, 1.5 hours probably this morning, really inspired me to want to talk about it, because I say if, there's one VR game that you get a chance to play in 2017, at, still the very early stages of VR, I would say that it would be Superhot. For those that don't know what Superhot is, the whole elevator pitch of the game is that it's a first-person shooter where time only moves when you do. If you're checking on our YouTube version, there's the screenshot behind me here. But essentially, the world is a very monochromatic, and the background is all gray, and it makes these characters that are polygonal and red-orange, they pop out a whole lot. But the idea is that if you're playing the base Superhot game, it's a first-person shooter. There are these large levels constructed, many enemies. You're moving all around the world. And because the time only moves when you do, you're dodging bullets in a very traditional first-person shooter setting. That being said, you are kind of trained over many years to know what you can do in a first-person shooter. I mean, you have the one gun, you're aiming with that dual stick, or keyboard, mouse. You can WASD, all that good stuff. But with Super Hot, you can dodge bullets very easily, because when you don't, you can just stop, not move, kind of survey the surroundings, and move accordingly. And you're firing bullets with lead time in consideration, judging how the opponents have moved. It's really, really interesting. And if you haven't played it, it's definitely one of those first-person shooter experiences that it's very different than anything in the last decade, maybe even. It's really, really genre-defining in that way. But Super Hot came out last year. Now, Super Hot VR was originally developed for Oculus. And so it kind of came there first. Earlier this year, it came to HTC Vive, which I happened to play the game on. If you're curious about what makes Super Hot VR unique, there are a couple instances with that. So first of all, you have dual wielding. Now I would imagine that's a pretty big difference, because right from the beginning in Super Hot, you have just the one gun. You're used to those first-person mechanics, but in Super Hot VR, you are kind of only contained to this small space to move about in. With HTC Vive, with Oculus, you're kind of bound by your set room scale. And so you have these enemies placed around you, and they're firing bullets all around, and you're dodging within that small space. But you do have the dual wielding to take into consideration. Both your right hand and your left hand could be a weapon to catch guns, to catch swords, to throw shuriken. And it's also part of that because it's the Vive controllers, it's the touch controllers. They move in kind of a three-dimensional sort of space. You can hold a gun to the side and fire at particular angles. Try to reach around a wall in essence and fire. Not something that you can easily do in Super Hot. Now, VR is kind of staged in multiple levels, whereas Super Hot has one kind of longer level with multiple enemies that you have to kind of move about in the perfect way. VR is broken up into these little mini chunks, like enemies maybe 3 or 4 per chunk, but to complete the level, you have to beat each one without dying. And if you die at the end, you have to go all the way back to this little section and start it all over again until you kind of complete that section in the perfect run. So the fundamentals of each game are structured very differently, but Super Hot VR, with how it's segmented with each little mini mission, and like it's kind of exhilarating to see. And if I've done my job on YouTube here in the edit, I've put up some of my gameplay footage that I've recorded. So you can kind of see that it's very trial and error. When you discover a new section that you haven't played before, you may die very early, or you're learning where the enemies are and what their patterns are. But because you're beating the same first, sort of missions over and over and over again in that level section, you get to become very good after a certain point. But it's always pushing. It's always trying to discover that new element. In VR, you also get you're moving around. It's a lot of tension. It's definitely a physical element to it. I mean, I have not really perspired playing any VR games in particular, but for this one, for playing for an hour and a half, and you're moving all around, it takes a toll. It gets that visor a bit sweaty, so that's unique. Honestly, for all of the VR games and experiences that are out there for 2017 in this infancy of virtual reality, there are only so many that have actual extended gameplay, extended stories. I mean, I mentioned previously on this podcast Batman Arkham VR, and that's a 45-minute to an hour experience where you do get the sense of it's an extended narrative there, and there's interesting gameplay there. But for so many that are just mini games and just short little experiences, to play something like this where you could easily have such an engaging experience with the controller or with keyboard and mouse, but it's very transposed into a visceral sort of physical element. I think for 2017, and of course this will change in the future, I say Super Hot VR is one that you do have to play. Again, still very early stages with it. But it's something I'm excited to go back to, excited to, continue to play. For me last year, my favorite VR game was Audio Shield. And if you remember Audio Surf, that was where it kind of takes your custom MP3 library, creates a level based on it, and you navigate it that way. Audio Shield is the same way, where you're using shields to kind of intercept bullets as opposed to jumping different tracks. So that was great for last year. But I think this year, you could say Resident Evil 7. I haven't gotten around to playing that yet. You could say something like Until Dawn, Rush of Blood for PlayStation VR. I haven't gotten to play that. But for what I recommend and for the pedigree of game that it's sort of built on and inspired on, give Super Hot VR a try if you are in a position to try and play virtual reality. If not, go find a friend who does and make that the one game that you try this year. So that's what I have to say. When we come back, we will get to the callers over at rhymeswithasia.com/call. What do you have to say? And if you don't have VR, here's something to ponder. What would be a virtual reality experience that you eventually want to witness firsthand with VR? Maybe the technology isn't there yet, but where do you want VR to go? We can maybe talk about that. We can talk about anything gaming related that you like. What is it you're playing recently? What are your favorite games? Anything's on the table there. That will be when we come back here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. Lots to possibly talk about today. I mean, whether it's, you missed our post E3 show and you want to discuss aspects there, or, any type of game that you're a big fan of and you want to keep playing, or maybe even virtual reality and talking about Super Hot there. Lots to consider, lots to discuss, and we leave it up to you, the callers. So let's see what you have to say. Joining us from Illinois, Video Game Guru 64. Welcome back to the Power Switch.
Hello.
Hey.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for calling in. What did you have in mind to talk about today?
Wanted to talk about E3 wrap-up since I didn't get to talk about it last week. I think Ubisoft definitely won E3 for me because they had the games, they had the emotional aspect to them, and they had everything.
Yeah, it was a good conference. Going into it, you'd think that Ubisoft had kind of a lot of their cards played out. I mean, they were not necessarily leaking things of their own accord, though many things like Assassin's Creed Origins did get leaked, right? But, they were kind of showing a lot with Far Cry 5, and, South Park was obviously going to be a known entity. But they did show a lot that was new, and I think that plays well at E3, and we kind of saw that with Sony, who kind of repeated a lot of the same games from last year, just looking at a deeper look there. But showing a lot new for Ubisoft. I think what was it, the Star game, like the Toys to Life kind of game. I think that came out of nowhere. It doesn't show well that I'm blanking on what the actual title of the game is. But that really came out of nowhere to show Nintendo Switch of all things. And now granted, Mario and Rabbids was another one that, again, we knew quite a lot about from leaks and whatnot, but to see it in motion and to see a lot of people receive it so well, I mean, that's promising.
Yeah. I feel like Nintendo did good. They didn't do amazing because if they would have shown off like gameplay footage of Metroid Prime 4 or the new Pokemon game that's coming to Switch, then they would have probably exceeded what Ubisoft did. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. If they had shown more than just to say that we're working on this or that, these exist, though, if you could make the same argument that if they were, missing that aspect, I mean, then they would be missing the megatons, the bombshells, what have you. What were your reactions, I guess, to those? Because like those got a lot of people talking, particularly for Nintendo's show.
Yeah. I said, great, good for them. I have no idea what that's gonna be like, except Metroid Prime 4. I know that's gonna be like I hope the other Prime series, you never know. It's a new development studio. It's a new team, so I don't know what's going on with them.
Yeah, that is an interesting aspect. I mean, certainly while watching that Metroid Prime reveal, you were hoping for the Retro Studios logo to pop up, and it didn't. But that's where the journalists press at E3. You find out it's Kensuke Tanabe, who's Trilogy producer, and then he kind of pulls together like his dream team in a way to work on the game internally at Nintendo. And you'd think that there's enough pedigree and there's enough sort of laid out what Metroid Prime and a numbered sequel is. So I don't expect for them to deviate too much from that. Plus, you have certain aspects. I think at the end of 3, there was if I remember correctly, Silex's ship kind of went after Samus at the end. So they've talked in different interviews, and you kind of may guess where the game may be leading. But again, I would have liked to see at least a screenshot, or is it too early in development? Nintendo talks about saying that, Metroid and Pokemon for Switch, those are 2018 titles. And, they throw that out there and it's like, you say that, but I'm not too sure on the Metroid side of things.
Yeah, I feel like those like 2019 or so. More on Metroid, probably not on Pokemon, because who knows? Because they've been releasing constantly new Pokemon games every single year through like X and Y onward.
For some people, they weren't too keen on Pokemon being released constantly year after year. But they sell so well, so who can argue? It will be interesting to see what happens with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon this year. I still think they have a lot to do to kind of sell the differentiator. Yeah. Like, why should we still pick this up on 3DS after Sun and Moon? Like, do you really expect us to double dip just because you have a few totem Pokemon that are different? I'm not too sure about going in like that.
I personally hope that they will flesh out the story more, and they will go into more of the Ultra wormhole space, so we can see what actually goes on there and something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, entirely possible. Now, one of my big gripes personally with the Nintendo show was having Kirby and Yoshi just no title, just 2018. Did any of those games kind of pique your interest?
Definitely Kirby, because I like that they're going back to Kirby 64 and they're combining abilities again, and Superstar and Kirby 64 mash up with the enemies being your allies, and then you can use the enemies to help you use combining elements from those enemies.
Yeah, and I think the multiplayer aspect helps there. Whether it's kind of as if you were playing with other people, but the CPU controlled enemies. I think that was a neat thing to show. It's just they had a lot in each of those trailers to kind of sell you on the game, but to just say Kirby, to just say Yoshi, like there's not too much there. So I guess that was a bit of a gripe there.
It's like Kirby, Yoshi, ... Yeah. It's like, what's the titles of those games?
And I guess it's better that than say like Kirby for Switch, Yoshi for Switch, to kind of with like Kirby 64, granted the crystal shards and all that,
and no trailer, and Yoshi and no trailer.
Right. At least they showed something. At least development seems to be rather far along there. Anything else from E3 really catch your eye? From other conferences, games that really appeal to you?
The Microsoft conference, I don't know if you knew this or not. Lucky Tail.
Yeah. That was an Oculus game, right? Originally.
Yes, mm-hmm. It was an Oculus game. So they're now creating Super Lucky Tales.
Yeah, originally an Oculus game. I think it was even an Oculus launch game. So that's a game where it being a 3D platformer, like I have not played it, do not have an Oculus. I don't think it came to Vive. But I wonder how that adopted, how well that really took off. If people really took to that well, how well it controlled. It's probably one you just do with a controller, right? I don't imagine there's any touch or any of those sort of 3D controller room scale sort of controller interaction. But maybe if he jumps closer to you, that's more appealing. Good that I guess that IP continues on, but there's not. We'll have to see how it looks. I mean, it should be a good experience, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Video Game Guru 64, thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate the time. Anything you'd like to plug?
A week from now is starting Done Quick at SGDQ.
Yeah, SGDQ is coming up. That's pretty exciting. Always looking forward to those. Yeah, feels like very soon since AGDQ, but every 6 months it keeps coming around. Definitely looking forward to that. That's what is that Games Done Quick on Twitch?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so looking forward to that. Check out the schedule. Should be up there. For sure. That's a good recommendation, and we'll be looking forward to some speedruns from that community.
And it's my birthday tomorrow.
Oh, well, happy birthday. Well, have a great day, and thanks again for calling in Video Game Guru 64. You have a good one, all right?
Yay. Yep.
All right, guys, thanks for calling in. When we come back, we'll talk about that Steam summer sale. We'll talk about, maybe the best deals that are available, something that I would recommend. That's all when we come back. You're on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. This week's Tempo Control music is brought to you by Crash Bandicoot. You can find a new video game music top 10 list from a specific game soundtrack every Tuesday over at youtube.com/rhymeswithasia. Now let's talk about the Steam sale. I mean, every summer, every holiday, lots of Steam sales go up for discounted prices. And so I wanted to kind of go through some of what I think are the most interesting sales, something I'd recommend if you're looking for something from a higher price range down to a few dollars. Some different recommendations for you. Let's start out with Nier Automata. This is down from $60 to $42. Now, granted, a new game, probably a few months old, but it's going to be in contention for some people's game of the year. Definitely get this one if you are more of a Platinum Games fan, the action sort of style there. I would recommend that one at 42. I mean, you're talking about multiple gameplay, multiple run-throughs of that game. So you'll get a lot for your money if that's the kind of game that you're interested in. Now, the one I picked up on this morning was the Super Hot Mind is Software bundle. Now, this includes the Super Hot VR game that I'm really big on, but also the regular Super Hot game that we had DQP call in. We've had a lot of people sing its praises as a very innovative shooter for the last decade, really even. Now that comes down to $28 total. That's pretty good when you consider that normal Super Hot VR is $25, Super Hot on its own is $20. To have that go from $45 down to $28, that's pretty good for a really, really great shooter. Now, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Game of the Year Edition needs really no one else to really sell it. For $25 to get The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, you get Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, all of that for $25. Setting records for all of the Game of the Year awards it won in 2015. I think that's a no-brainer. If you have yet to get on that bandwagon, that's a great price for that. Also, Dishonored 2 was a game that really got high Metacritic scores last year. It got its normal price cut down to $40, and then you have a 50% cut. So getting that game for $20, again, recommend playing the first game, but Dishonored 2 got really great reviews last year. Kind of, I guess, missing out on some of the Game of the Year awards, but a really stellar experience from all things considered. And so definitely check that out for $20. Same thing goes with Doom, except that one, took home certain Game of the Year awards last year for 2016. But for that to be $15, I mean, even if you don't have that in your Steam library, you're missing on one of the most visceral shooters ever made, at least of, the last generation for sure. So Doom 2016 for $15, jump on that. Ori and the Blind Forest Definitive Edition. To get this for $10 is really a steal. I mean, you talk about its sequel being unveiled at E3 2017. That's kind of keeps it relevant in mind with Will of the Wisps. But this is probably one of the next games I want to get to. I still have it on Xbox One. It was where I bought the original version way back when, didn't get around to it, and then Xbox Live offered the Definitive Edition for a free upgrade for a couple days. So pounce on that. But to get it, for $10, I think normally it's $20 at least. So check it out for sure for $10. The same goes in that $10 price range for Wolfenstein: The New Order. Another really, really well acclaimed first-person shooter from Bethesda. Again, comes in mind with E3 2017 with the new Colossus. If you want to get the DLC for the New Order, The Old Blood, that'll be also $10, but for $20 total, I mean, great value for those two games, for sure. Getting under $10 now, Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley for $9? I mean, granted, it's going to depend on where you want to play this game. So I want to eventually play Stardew Valley for Switch. I never got into it on PC, but to check that out for $9 on PC, if that's where you want to play, don't miss that for sure. And probably the most bang for your buck for this Steam summer sale, again, comes with a sequel game delved into more at E3 2017. That would be Middle Earth: Shadow of War, the original Shadow of Mordor, the Game of the Year edition, from $20 down to $4. I mean, to get the main game, which is, I guess, very Assassin's Creed-like in its action, its combat, it adds the Nemesis system that you're seeing some games, though I'm surprised not more, pick up on. That plus its DLC for $4, can't miss there. Also check out Transistor. Transistor from Supergiant Games, the creators from Bastion, to have Transistor for $3. I mean, that's almost just change at this point. Now, I'm assuming a lot of the Valve games like, Left 4 Dead and Portal 2, you probably have all those, but those would be some of my recommendations if you're looking to, maybe fill out your Steam library during these sales like I tend to do. And that'll do it for this episode of The Power Switch. We are hosted by rhymeswithasia.com, and we're on YouTube and Twitch at rhymeswithasia. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Power Switch. And you can email us any questions, concerns, comments, or opportunities at powerswitchpod@gmail.com. You can subscribe to The Power Switch on podcast services such as iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And if you could be so kind as to leave a review, that would really help as well. But most importantly, to participate in future episodes, you should join our community on Discord by visiting rhymeswithasia.com/call. It's a small but growing community, and in these early months of the show, it'll really be easier than ever to have your voice heard on this podcast. If you want a YouTube video to watch, if you want to check out another podcast that I recommend, the Kind of Funny guys over at Kind of Funny Games have started up their new daily podcast called Kind of Funny Games Daily. This is taking the DNA elements of Podcast Beyond from IGN, of P.S. I Love You XOXO, also from Kind of Funny Games, but distilling it across all games and daily news topics. You're bringing in Andrea Renee, Danny O'Dwyer, also Tim Geddes, Andy Cortez, but primarily Greg Miller fronting that show. But to have a daily podcast based on the day's news, it's pretty remarkable. Go check it out if you really can't get enough of game news and want that daily bill. So Kind of Funny Games Daily, you can find that on podcast services, and go check out Kind of Funny Games on YouTube. That would be something I'd recommend. Go check out their first week of content. Anyway, wanted to check just to make sure, does this time work? Got changing schedules with different sleep schedules in the house, different responsibilities. Maybe switching to this Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. That would be interesting to see if we continue to do that, but hopefully we need to get some good turnout and keep hearing different feedback and different opinions from different people. So that'd be great. Now stay tuned to this Discord channel as everything develops. And regardless whether it's live or on your own time, I look forward to you joining us for our next episode. With that, I'm Peter Spezia. Until next time, switch up, call in, game on.